The night had crossed every professional boundary. Truth or Dare, a game designed for teenagers, had somehow infected a room full of adults who should have known better. The music was too loud, the drinks were too strong, and everyone's eyes had locked on to the man who always sat alone in the corner, the quiet one, the one nobody really knew. His name was James Carter, and in 4 years at Crescent Analytics, he had perfected the art of invisibility. Sarah Bennett was the opposite of invisible. She moved through the office like summer itself, bright, warm, impossible to ignore. 18 months with the company, and she knew everyone's coffee order, remembered birthdays, organized happy hours that people actually wanted to attend. She had the kind of laugh that carried across the entire floor, the kind that made you smile even if you didn't know what was funny. People gravitated toward her because she made things feel lighter, easier, more alive. They had barely spoken, different departments, different worlds. Sarah had noticed James, of course. It was hard not to. He was always alone, always somewhere on the edge of things, like a ghost who punched a clock. She'd tried pulling him into conversation once or twice, but his answers came in single sentences, his eyes already searching for the exit. She stopped trying after that. Some people just preferred to be left alone, or so she thought. The party had started with good intentions. End of fiscal year celebration. Catered food, open bar, a Spotify playlist someone's intern had carefully curated. By 9 o'clock, professional courtesy had dissolved into something looser, something reckless. Someone suggested karaoke. Someone else pulled out poker chips. Then Marcus, from accounting, always Marcus, stood up on a chair and shouted that they should play Truth or Dare. The room erupted. People cheered, people groaned, but nobody left, because nobody ever leaves when things are just starting to get interesting. The game escalated the way these things always do. Harmless dares became confessions. Confessions became accusations. Someone texted an ex. Someone admitted they'd lied on their resume. The laughter got louder, sharper, meaner. Sarah was in her element, egging people on, volunteering herself when things got too tame. She thrived in chaos like this. It was oxygen to her. Then it was her turn again, and Marcus grinned at her with the kind of mischief that meant trouble was coming. He pointed across the room at James, who sat near the back wall with that glass of water, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the furniture. "I dare you," Marcus said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "to go over there and mess with him." He jabbed his finger toward James again. "Make him blush. Make him squirm. I don't care how you do it. Just make it good." The room erupted. People turned to watch, hungry for entertainment at someone else's expense. Sarah felt the weight of every eye in that loft. She could have refused. She could have asked for a different dare. But she had built her reputation on never backing down, on being the one who always said yes, who always played along. So she stood up, put on her best grin, and walked across the room. She didn't see the trap she was walking into. James didn't look up until she was standing right in front of him. When he did, his expression didn't change. He just watched her, calm and unreadable, like he was waiting for something he'd seen coming from a mile away. Sarah felt a flicker of doubt, but she pushed it down. This was just a game. It was supposed to be fun. She leaned against the wall beside him, tilted her head, and let her voice carry just enough for the crowd to hear. "You seem to be good in bed," she said, her tone playful, teasing. "Are you married?" She expected him to stammer. She expected him to turn red, to laugh it off, to give some awkward response that would let everyone move on to the next round. That was how these things went. But James didn't do any of that. He looked at her for a long moment, his face completely still. Then he said, in a voice that was quiet but clear, "No, I'm still waiting." The laughter stopped. The room went silent so fast it felt like the air had been sucked out. Sarah stared at him, her smile frozen on her face. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what he meant, but something in the way he said it, something in the flatness of his tone, told her it wasn't a joke, it wasn't a comeback, it was the truth. Someone coughed, someone shifted in their seat. Marcus tried to laugh, but it came out forced and uncomfortable. Sarah took a step back, her hand suddenly cold. She wanted to say something to lighten the mood, to turn it into a punchline, but the words wouldn't come. James didn't look angry, he didn't look embarrassed, he just looked tired, the kind of tired that lives in your bones. He set his glass down on the windowsill, stood up, and walked toward the door without saying another word. No one tried to stop him. The room stayed quiet until the door clicked shut behind him. Then the noise came back all at once, people talking over each other, trying to laugh it off, trying to pretend the whole thing hadn't just turned strange and heavy. Sarah went back to her spot in the circle, but she didn't feel like laughing anymore. She left an hour later, earlier than she usually would, and spent the entire ride home thinking about that one sentence. No, I'm still waiting. What did that mean? Who was he waiting for? By the time she got to her apartment, she had convinced herself she was overthinking it. Maybe he was socially awkward. Maybe he didn't know how to handle being put on the spot. Maybe it didn't mean anything at all. But when she lay down in bed that night, staring at the ceiling in the dark, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had crossed a line she hadn't even known was there. She had thought it was harmless. She had thought it was funny. But the look on James's face hadn't been funny. It had been something else, something quiet and raw and real, and she had been the one to put it there. Monday morning arrived like a judgment. Sarah saw James in the hallway before their first meeting, and her stomach dropped. He nodded, brief, polite, professional, and kept walking. No anger, no resentment, just the same careful distance he had always maintained. That somehow made it worse. She wanted him to be mad at her. She wanted him to call her out, to give her something she could apologize for directly. But he didn't give her that. He just moved through his day like Friday night had never happened, and Sarah was left to sit with the guilt that nobody else seemed to be carrying.
The guilt sat in her chest like a stone she couldn't swallow. It was there when she laughed at someone's joke in the break room. It was there when she organized the next happy hour. It was there every time she saw James at his desk, headphones on, eyes fixed on his screen, completely unreachable. She started to notice things she hadn't before. The way he always ate lunch at his desk. The way he left exactly at 5:30 every day, no exceptions. The way he never joined the after-work drinks or the weekend plans. She had always assumed it was because he thought he was too good for them. Now she wondered if it was something else entirely. 3 weeks passed. Sarah tried to go back to normal, but normal felt different now. She started paying attention to James in a way she hadn't before, not with curiosity or judgment, but with something quieter. Understanding, maybe? Or just awareness. She noticed that he always replied to emails within the hour, that his reports were thorough and clear, that when he did speak in meetings, people listened because he only spoke when he had something worth saying. He wasn't antisocial. He was just careful with where he placed his energy. One afternoon, Sarah found herself in the break room at the same time as James. He was making tea, not coffee, tea, and she was refilling her water bottle. The silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry about the party. That was out of line." James looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "It's fine," he said. "You were just playing the game." But Sarah shook her head. "It's not fine. I put you on the spot. I made assumptions. I'm sorry." James was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Apology accepted." It wasn't much, but it was something, and it made Sarah feel like maybe she could breathe again. After that, something shifted. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but enough that Sarah noticed. James started nodding when they passed in the hallway. He replied to her emails with more than one-word answers. Once, when she asked if he wanted a coffee refill, he said yes. It was progress, slow, careful progress, the kind that didn't demand anything from either of them but left the door open just in case. Then, one Friday, everything changed. Sarah was leaving the building when she saw James standing near the entrance, phone pressed to his ear, his expression tight with frustration. She slowed her pace, not quite eavesdropping, but close enough to hear the general tone. He was talking to someone about picking up his daughter. Something had fallen through. When he hung up, he stood there for a moment, staring at his phone like it had just delivered the worst possible news. Sarah walked over. "Everything okay?" she asked. James looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely stressed. "My babysitter canceled last minute," he said. "I have to pick up my daughter from school in 20 minutes, but I'm supposed to be on a call with a client in 10. I don't know how to make both things work." Sarah didn't think. She just said, "I can take the call for you." James frowned. "You're not on this account." Sarah shrugged. "I've sat in on enough of these to know the basics. Just send me the file and tell them what they need to hear. I'll handle it. You go get your daughter." James stared at her like he was trying to figure out if she was serious. Then he nodded slowly. "Are you sure?" Sarah smiled. "I'm sure. Go." He left. She took the call. She somehow kept the client happy despite knowing only about 60% of what she was talking about. When it was over, she texted James to let him know everything had gone fine. He replied an hour later with a simple, "Thank you. I owe you one." The following Monday, Sarah found a coffee waiting on her desk. It was from the place across the street, the one that cost twice as much as office coffee, but actually tasted good. There was a sticky note attached. "For Friday, thanks, James." Sarah smiled and tucked the note into her desk drawer. It was a small gesture, but it felt like something had changed between them. Not in a romantic way, not in a dramatic way, but just in the quiet, steady way that trust gets built when two people decide they're willing to show up for each other. Over the next few weeks, they fell into an easy rhythm. They didn't hang out outside of work, they didn't text about personal things, but they talked more. James told her about his daughter's soccer games. Sarah told him about the online class she was taking. They had lunch together once in the break room, and it wasn't awkward. It was just comfortable, like they'd figured out how to exist in the same space without needing to perform or explain themselves. And then, one afternoon, Sarah saw the photograph. It was small, tucked behind James's monitor, but she could see it clearly now. A woman with dark hair and a bright smile, holding a little girl who was maybe 3 or 4 years old. The woman looked happy, not camera happy, actually happy. The kind of happiness that came from the inside, not from trying to look good for a photo. Sarah didn't say anything about it, but she understood now in a way she hadn't before. James wasn't waiting because he couldn't find someone. He was waiting because the person he had loved was irreplaceable. And moving on didn't mean forgetting. It meant figuring out how to carry that love forward without letting it crush him. Sarah thought about that a lot over the next few days, about how easy it was to assume you knew someone's story just because you saw them every day, about how much people carried in silence because it was easier than explaining. One evening, a few weeks later, James stopped by Sarah's desk with his coat on, his bag over his shoulder, but instead of heading for the elevator, he stood there and said, "My daughter has a soccer game this Saturday. It's at 10 in the morning. If you're not busy, you're welcome to come." Sarah looked up at him, surprised. "Really?" James nodded. "You don't have to, but I thought I'd ask." Sarah smiled. "I'd like that." James gave a small nod, then turned and walked toward the elevator. Sarah watched him go, feeling something warm and quiet settle in her chest. It wasn't a big moment, it wasn't a turning point, but it was real, and that was enough. Saturday morning came, and Sarah showed up at the field wearing jeans and a jacket, holding a cup of coffee she'd picked up on the way. James was already there, standing on the sideline next to a girl with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. The girl looked exactly like the woman in the photo, but with James's serious eyes. When Sarah walked over, James introduced them. "This is Lily," he said. "Lily, this is Sarah. She works with me." Lily looked at Sarah with the kind of cautious curiosity that 10-year-olds had perfected. "Hi," she said. Sarah smiled. "Hi, your dad says you're really good at soccer." Lily shrugged, but she was smiling. "I'm okay." Then she ran off to join her team.
Sarah and James stood on the sideline together, watching the game in comfortable silence. Lily scored a goal in the second half, and James clapped. his face breaking into a rare, genuine smile. Sarah cheered too, and when Lily looked over at them, she waved. James waved back. After the game, Lily ran over, sweaty and grinning. James handed her a water bottle and told her she did great. Lily looked at Sarah and said, "Are you my dad's friend?" Sarah glanced at James, then back at Lily. "Yeah," she said. "I think so." Lily nodded, satisfied, and then ran off to talk to her teammates. James looked at Sarah, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked like he wasn't carrying quite as much weight. "Thanks for coming," he said. Sarah smiled. "Thanks for inviting me." They didn't say much else. They didn't need to. They just stood there, watching Lily laugh with her friends, and it felt like something had quietly, carefully, finally settled into place. Not a happy ending, not a resolution, just a beginning. The kind that didn't announce itself with fireworks or grand declarations. The kind that happened when two people decided to stop hiding and start showing up. And maybe that was the point. That waiting didn't mean being stuck. It meant being patient enough to let the right moments find you, and kind enough to recognize them when they did. Because some stories aren't about falling in love. They're about learning how to be human again, how to trust again, how to let someone in even when you're terrified of what it might cost. And sometimes that's the bravest thing of all.
For more videos, please subscribe, like, and comment.